And welcome to our legislative breakfast, brought to you each Monday throughout the legislative session by the Bridport Grange and the Addison County Farm Bureau with help from the Addison Chamber of Commerce and Addison Economic Development. They are all happy to see this many folks come out. This is our governor's breakfast today, and we'll go over some of the rules of the game. Each Monday we meet throughout the legislative session to speak to our legislators. This is the only county in the state of Vermont that does this every week throughout the legislative session. And we are probably the best informed county because our legislators come and they talk to us face to face. It is a citizen legislature, and we're fortunate to be part of that as we participate in these Monday morning meetings. So with that, let me tell you what goes on. We have a red light up here. There's green, yellow, and red. Each person gets a chance to stand, come to a microphone, because this is on television, and television without a microphone or without being able to hear you is very bad television. You'll get a green light for 2 minutes, for actually 1 minute and 45 seconds. The red light will go on, the yellow light goes on next, and then the red, and your 2 minutes for your question is up. And again, we hope that you have questions and not personal issues for which you'd like to stand and talk. We'd like to have questions for the legislator. In addition, legislators have 3 minutes to answer you, and the same light system works for the legislators. The governor will be here shortly, and when the governor comes, we're going to give him the opportunity to speak and have questions of the governor answered, and asked and answered. So before we have the governor come in, let us introduce our legislators, have each legislator come to a microphone and let us know who they are, and the fact that they're here, obviously, and secondly, what they're doing, very briefly, what they're doing in the legislature at this point, and then we'll open it for questions. Senator?
Good morning. My name is Chris Bray. I live in New Haven. I'm one of your 2 state senators. I chair the Senate Natural Resources and the Energy Committee in the mornings, and in the afternoon I'm on government operations. So I'll give a very brief report out. It's been an exciting couple weeks. We've passed out 5 bills from Senate persons, and one is protection from chemicals in water. So you may have heard about PFOA being in the drinking water, in well water down in Bennington. PFOA and 4 other chemicals, we defined a safety standard around those, but they hadn't been then carried on to public drinking water supplies, so we addressed that, and we're moving forward on more protection for drinking water. No one expects to be drinking something carcinogenic when they turn on their public water supply. Secondly, we did a bill on hydrofluorocarbons. It's a refrigerant that's 1,000 times more impactful as a greenhouse gas. The EPA had a rule and receded from that rule. We've seen this pattern before. Unfortunately, the EPA is being less protective of environmental and human health, so Vermont is stepping in to fill a gap using model legislation from another state. We also have a plastic bag bill that people may be familiar with. It says we can reduce and then eliminate single-use plastic bags, straws, and styrofoam. And I'm getting a look from the moderator, so I'm going to stop there. But it's been a great 2 weeks. There's a lot going on.
Thank you, Senator. Peter?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Conlon. I live in Cornwall. I represent Cornwall, Leicester, Salisbury, Goshen, Ripton, and Hancock. I'm in the House. And I serve on the Education Committee, where we have been spending a lot of time on 2 bills in particular. One which came over from the Senate that looks at action levels for lead in drinking water at public or all schools as well, and child care centers. And we've been taking a lot of testimony on that in order to sort of get the money right and make sure the bill can be successful. And we've also been dealing with a bill that would address situations where independent colleges close abruptly and what becomes of the student records when that happens. This was really born out of the situation when Burlington College closed a few years ago, and everybody just walked away and left a room full of student records that the state, with no obligation to do so, did take possession of, which has been a costly and difficult challenge. And then we've got 3 more colleges closing potentially, and we want to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Senator Ruth?
Hello, I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I'm your other state senator along with Senator Bray. I live in East Middlebury. So in the morning, I serve on the Agriculture Committee, and last week we passed a sort of omnibus rural economic development bill that includes a lot of provisions to help our ag economy and our forestry economy. It has a lot of different sort of Christmas tree ornaments in the bill, and if anybody's interested, I can talk more about that. In the afternoon, I serve on the Education Committee, and like Representative Conlon, we've been talking about the college closure situation and student records, and we passed a bill on Friday that would deal with several higher education things, including that, so I'm hoping that we'll be on the same page with the House at some point with that. The bill also includes a pilot program for a career and technical education program with our career and tech centers at the K-12 level and our state colleges at the higher education level to try to get students an associate's degree in a career and tech field earlier. And then the third part of the bill is to create a task force on campus sexual harm. I know that this is an issue of great importance here at Middlebury College, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about the details of that and what that would entail. We also passed a very difficult and emotional compromise on extending the deadline for some schools who have not been able to merge their school districts under the law passed by the legislature a number of years ago called Act 46. This is not as relevant in Addison County because we have thankfully merged all of our school districts here, but if there is anyone interested in that topic, I'm happy to talk about that too. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hardy. Amy? I'll let Amy go first.
Good morning. I'm Amy Sheldon. I represent Middlebury, the legislature, and I am chairing the House Natural Resources and Fish and Wildlife Committee this session. We have primarily been spending our time looking at the Act 250 revisions. That study commission that I also chaired spent 18 months looking at it as a broad, it's a big bill. It has a number of buckets, I call them, and we've been going week by week, subject by subject, addressing the issues. Last week we looked at administration and appeals and are considering moving that back into the Natural Resources Board's realm. This week we'll be taking up slate cores, and I actually think that might be the end of our subject buckets, and we're going to dig in much deeper now with markup, looking at the bill in detail, working out those specifics of what's going to be in and what's going to be out.
Thank you. Harvey?
Yeah, Representative Harvey Smith, and I serve on the House Natural Committee with Amy, and she's correct. We spend the majority of our time working on Act 250 and trying to understand it, digging in, and it's going to be, I think, a while before we get to the end. So, thank you.
Matt?
Good morning. Matt Byron, State Representative for the towns and city of Virgins, Ferrisburg, Waltham, Addison, and Hinton. I serve on the Committee Housing, General, and Military Affairs. We touch on a pretty broad range of subject matter. Items that we've moved forward and worked on to this point. The Family Benefit Insurance Bill was something that we passed out of our committee early onto Ways and Means. that is a really comprehensive bill that we see as a workforce development package that supports working families, as well as businesses as a recruitment and retention tool. We have also worked in the housing front. We've spoken with a lot of partners in that realm, both in advocacy and the state, trying to figure out where to appropriately allocate the limited amount of resources that we have to construct housing, weatherization, things of that nature. We just, on the military side of things, we oversee National Guard Veterans Affairs. We just passed 2 bills in that regard, in that realm. One was helping with the interment and burial of unclaimed remains of service members. We thought that was a very important bill to move forward. And also just passed out a bill that was going to touch up, sort of streamline the process. We just elected a new adjutant general, and we took a lot of feedback from the candidates themselves and other shareholders in that process to help kind of streamline that and make it a little bit more clean. As the candidates were a little, it was a cumbersome process. They're not really politicians. So we were trying to take their feedback, create a committee that would sort of vet the candidates themselves and pass recommendations along to the legislature. And that's about it to this point. And I look forward to hearing from everyone later on.
Thank you, Matt. Robin?
Good morning, I'm Robin Shai, State Representative representing Middlebury, along with Amy. I serve on the House Ways and Means Committee. This is the revenue side of the money in the state of Vermont. So anything that is a tax or a fee comes through our committee, even if it starts in other committees. And last week and this week are probably 2 of the busiest weeks of the session, because last week all the policy committees had to have their bills out of their committee, and this week all the money committees have to have their bills out of their committee so they can cross over to the other body. So we're seeing a lot of bills right now from policy committees that have taxes and fees in them. So for example, on Friday we were dealing with everything from veterinary supplies to individual mandate for health care, and all kinds of other things in between. We are also working on our own fee bill. There's the administration has fees. It's the first time in 3 years we've had a fee bill, and so there's a lot of fees in there. Everything again from growing hemp in the agriculture world to registration for nurses and veterinarians and private investigators and realtors. So there's fees for all kinds of things. We are also taking up very seriously the paid family and medical leave bill that Matt just talked about, the insurance program, and figuring out the best design we can get with the program that will serve the most people and not cost too much, but we also see it as an economic development and recruiting tool, and any number of other things. So look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Robin. Caleb?
I'm Caleb Elder. I live in Starksboro and represent Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, and Starksboro. I'm also on the House Education Committee along with Peter, so you heard a little about that update. We've also got a bill in front of us looking at a moratorium on school construction spending statewide. The moratorium has been in place since 2007. So that's an interesting conversation, especially in the context of the lead and drinking water bill, and also a bill we're looking at radon that really just kind of speak to some greater facilities needs that would probably be good to have some state support with, in my opinion. So that's most of what we're working on. Also just mention the 2 caucuses that I'm part of. There are a lot of different caucuses, and of course part of the Democratic caucus, but one is the Climate Caucus, which is doing, I think, some good work and moving towards what I hope will be some even more impressive work as this session continues. But also part of the Women's Caucus, which is focused on women's issues, not just made up of women. But they've been focused on women's corrections in Vermont, so we just take a tour to Chittenden County Correctional Facility, where all 140 of Vermont's female inmates are currently housed, and so those are very interesting, challenging issues to look at as well. So, we'll update there.
Thank you, Caleb. Those of you who may have just come in, there's plenty of seats up front. I know a lot of people don't like to sit in front of the audience, but there are some seats if they'd like to sit down. And of course, I'd like to remind you that breakfast is still being served in the back, so if you get hungry during the session, please step over and have your breakfast. So we're finally to the point now where we've introduced all of our legislators. We're happy to see as many that are here. Is there someone who would like to ask the first question?
Yes, I would.
There you go.
Spence Putnam from Weybridge. I'm glad to hear Caleb mention climate change. There are a lot of people in this room who think that climate disruption is the #1 issue facing Vermont and facing indeed the whole globe. And yet, when you look at the priorities of the Democratic Party in Vermont, climate change is not even mentioned. And the leadership of both the House and Senate in Vermont are not putting a priority on climate issues. I personally think there's a lot of economic opportunity in looking seriously at what's coming at us in terms of climate change, getting ready for it, putting a price on carbon, and using that to finance the changes that we need to make. Now, Chris, you sent me an impressive list of some of the bills that you're putting forward last night. I know one is weatherization, but I'd like you and any other legislators who want to weigh in on what you're doing about climate change, why we're not making it the #1 priority, and what we can do to make it #1.
Okay, Chris.
Thank you, Spence. So the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee, we really have two hats that are related, and we have taken on a whole series of natural resource issues first. So we did this year's rewrite of our clean water program to deliver cleaner water more cost effectively across the state, et cetera, and I listed some other bills. And when we get back, we'll be taking a deep dive into weatherization and community scale renewable energy. So we're throwing the switch and taking up that whole other line of work that we do. So I think I agree with Spence, there's a big opportunity as well as a need to move on things. Weatherization, I think it's, we all know that when you make a home or business more energy efficient, you save money, you reduce fossil fuel use, and you deliver an environmental dividend. We've passed a law almost 10 years ago that said we're going to weatherize 80,000 homes in Vermont by 2020. We're at about 26,000 right now, so we are well off pace. So the bill I'm introducing doubles the rate at which we'll do that weatherization work. Actually, it looks to step it up repeatedly over the next 3 years. So it's and what are the impacts of that? We export about $1.5 billion a year out of Vermont, buying in fuels of various sorts. When we generate renewable local energy and power and heat those homes with that renewable energy, we're keeping all those dollars in state. So there's an environmental dividend that comes out of having that clean renewable energy heat our homes. There's also the work that gets done home by home, business by business, employing people doing that work. And there's also then the demand side. You have people creating renewable energy projects to power them. So there's it's really a win all the way around. And the question has been, how do we bring enough money to that system to really pick up the pace? I think the interest is growing, and I hope to see a bill out within a month on both those issues. Again, community scale energy. So just very briefly, people are familiar with net metering, which was originally designed to put solar at your home, spin your meter backwards. But we have many larger off-takers of energy. Municipalities, universities, schools, hospitals, and they are often interested in renewable power, but don't have the access to it, and net metering was never designed to deliver renewable energy to those really large customers. So community scale energy is a larger scale, lower cost way of delivering more renewables to more businesses and more citizens throughout the state. I agree with Spence. It has not been as visible, I think, as it ought to be, given that climate change is the biggest challenge we face. And we'll be picking up the pace in a big way on the Senate side in the next month.
Thank you, Senator. Rob?
Thanks. So this report that came out on decarbonization and climate change is called the RAP report. And just to follow up on Chris said, one of the most important things we can do is weatherization. That's one of the most effective tools we have to combat climate change. In House Ways and Means, we're doing a couple of things with regard to weatherization. We're clarifying some taxes that are there that have been unclear, and that is going to bring in more money for weatherization. And then there's another amendment related to that as well. So we are expecting, if these amendments pass, that it will bring in several $1 million more in weatherization funds than we have had in the past as a way to really boost the ability to weatherize homes in Vermont. We have the oldest housing stock in the nation, with something like 80% of our homes are over 40 years old, and I could go on. So weatherization is a big deal. Thanks.
Amy.
Yeah, great. So there's a lot of ways that my committee touches on addressing climate change, and I agree with Spence. It's a potential driver for our economy, and when you look at some of the specifics of what we're doing, you can see that. I won't talk anymore about weatherization, but my committee has fully supported that. There's been 2 reports on carbon pricing and the effects of that, and that's in some ways where the weatherization thing came from. That's one of the take-home messages from both of those reports. But we've been looking at, and I'm hopeful that we'll make it into the Act 250, this bill, protection of our forest blocks. So intact forest blocks that are working to produce trees that we use in our economy it's a green cycle, and that we're looking at ways additionally to pay large landowners, to compensate them when they really do sequester carbon. We can take carbon out of the atmosphere both through forestry practices and agricultural practices. So my committee's been advocating strongly for fully funding the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which gets at 2 important climate change issues. One is weatherization and affordable housing, and the other is protection of large tracts of agricultural land, which potentially could be sequestering large amounts of carbon. And again, in Act 250, we're looking at including climate change. One of the big drivers of our 50-year look back at Act 250 was the fact that things have changed, awareness has changed, and we're considering including an Act 250 criteria, a climate change criteria in the Act 250 bill. So those are some of the things we're working on. It's a large, it's a huge problem, and there's a lot of ways to tackle it. And I think, I know my committee, we're very aware of it.
Thank you. Yes.
Letitia Wolf, I live in Addison. I'm going to follow on thank you. First of all, it's so great to bring up climate change and have 3 elected officials jump up with information about how they're working on it. So I was glad to hear that. But I do have a question, but I want to say a couple of things first. One is, at a prior legislative breakfast, it was brought to my attention that some people are still unsure of this idea of climate change. And so I found a wonderful 1-page explanation that copies of which I will put out. And it just explains that the simple chemistry of how CO2 is emitted, how we can account for the amount of burning that happens, how we can measure over time, including trapped in ice, how this CO2 factor has occurred. We can analyze the atmosphere and understand that there are correlations of the chemistry from the sources of the CO2 along with it. And it goes on and explains down to the point of the huge number of scientists that have used these 9 particular factors and come to absolute proof. And one thing that's interesting is this fact-finding began in 1830. So we've been thinking about this for a long time. So my question comes from this. I came across a list of roughly 35 bills that are in one way or another on the topic of climate change. And so I sat down and sort of analyzed. Some of them are getting more information out, others are sources of money, and I couldn't quite put together how they would come to, and this is my question, a certainty that all these dots connect, and within the required time that we have in order to beat this monster, we can do it. So can we hear just a little bit more about how the dots connect so that we know we're going to mitigate enough CO2 in the brevity of time that we have available?
Do we have a legislator who wants to attempt that?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate how interested everyone who comes to these things is in learning more. And I'd say if I would recommend one single report that connects all those dots, knits all that information together, is the Energy Action Network's annual report, which came out roughly a month ago. So you can look up EAN or Energy Action Network Vermont, and they have a great annual report that looks at energy use in the three main ways that we use it, which is electrical generation, transportation, and in heating and cooling. And
That's what it looks like.
thank you to Senator Hardy. We have her copy with her. So here it is. The cover says 90% renewable by 2050. That was the overall guidance, the sort of star that we set to steer our course by 2050. And then within the legislature, there are bills that are addressing each of those three sectors. We've done a lot of great work in Vermont on clean electrical generation. There's more room to grow, but where we really have not made nearly as much progress as we would have liked is on transportation, the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, as well as thermal. So the weatherization program I was talking about before, a lot of our programs have been focused on weatherization for lower income Vermonters. The bill I'm moving with Senate Natural is weatherization for all. It makes sense for everyone, regardless of your level of income, to gain those kinds of economies of home and environmental benefits. On the transportation side, that's been, I think, the toughest nut to crack. We have a modest number of electric vehicles in Vermont, 3,000 or so. The rate at which they're appearing is growing. We're investing in charging stations, but I think that's where we have the single largest opportunity to make rapid progress in the next decade. So I see the governor's come in, so I'm going to sit down now.
Thank you, Senator. I think the next thing we should do in our program is to introduce to you, since the governor has come in, introduce to you and have Governor Bill Scott for breakfast.
Sure. Well, good morning. I'm not sure if I like the having me for breakfast, but hopefully you had a nice breakfast here this morning. Great to see you all today. I have a few minutes worth of remarks, and then we can go into questions and see if we can work out some of the details. But it's great to see so many people here. I want to thank all of you first for coming out this morning and supporting your community. I think that's really important. As organizations like our Regional Chamber of Commerce, the Planning Commission, farm bureaus, and community organizations, and it's key to integrating our cities, towns, and villages across Vermont. So I think it's important for us to get together, and your work is crucial to helping our state move forward, and so thank you all for doing so. You know, it wasn't too long ago that I was sworn into office for the second time, but not too long before that. We're one of only 2 states in the country that have 2-year terms. So about a little over 2 years ago, on my first day in office, I issued an executive order outlining the strategic goals of my administration. Really 3 simple goals that we wanted to accomplish. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, thanks. So 3 simple goals of my administration. And it was really about growing the economy, making Vermont more affordable, and protecting the most vulnerable. And it sounds simple, but we adhere to those, and we think about those each and every single day. So I believe we work towards these goals. I see a Vermont where families from every town are moving up the economic ladder with a good paying job and a way of life that they can afford. Where all kids have the same opportunity to achieve their full potential, and where we can all provide for our neighbors who need us most when they need us most. So it's an affordable Vermont with opportunity and economic growth, and great schools in every corner of our state, and initiatives that will benefit all Vermonters. But to achieve this future, we need to be honest about the challenges that we face because they're significant. We have a population, as you know, that's pretty stagnant. We're one of the oldest states in the nation, and right now, today, we're experiencing more deaths than births in our state. So that's not a recipe for economic growth. We saw the impact of this when Moody's recently downgraded our bond rating, in large part due to our lack of population growth, resulting in fewer working age Vermonters. So think about this. Since 2009, our labor force has declined by 15,000. 15,000 fewer people working or looking for work. 15,000 fewer Vermonters available for jobs we know businesses are trying to fill today. 15,000 fewer taxpayers as well. So to put this in perspective, every county except Chittenden has seen a decline in the number of people working. In fact, right here in Addison County, the labor force has declined by about 1,100 workers, about 5% of the workforce, since its peak in 2009. The demographic reality is showing up in our schools as well. So it's like the canary in the mine shaft. We're now educating 30,000 fewer K-12 students in our public schools than we were in 1997. That's an average loss of about 3 students every single day for 20 years. And that trend continues today. Since 2004, which wasn't all that long ago, Addison County's K-12 enrollment declined by over 1,400 students. That's 25%. 25% of its overall student population lost in just 15 years. These trends not only means fewer in our workforce and schools, but it also affects our state colleges, who count on Vermont kids for enrollment. It means fewer customers at our businesses, ratepayers for our utilities, fewer available for our volunteer fire departments. We're seeing that stress on our fire departments right now, and others who support the needs of our communities. And while we have fewer people working, we have growing pressures on our state budget, which means this. Despite having a surplus of about $35 million last year, we still began building this year's budget with about a $40 million gap. So we're on the losing end there. And this is just, and that's due to upward pressures and wages and pension growth and so forth, the payment that we need to make on our unfunded liabilities. On the campaign trail, a business owner told me, we don't need more taxes, we need more taxpayers. And I couldn't agree more. So my agenda this session focuses on helping Vermonters find a job or start a career. Anyone who wants a job should have a job today. We have about last week we announced a 2.5% unemployment rate, the lowest since 1976, which only tells half the story. It's good news in some respects, but it only tells half the story. Because we don't have enough people. So recruiting more workers and families to Vermont to reverse our demographic trends is part of the answer. And we must do this while working to make Vermont more affordable. And I think this work starts with making sure we pay attention to the things that make Vermont a great place to live. Our quality of life, the health and safety of our communities, and our incredible natural resources. My budget invests in each of these areas. And as I said in my budget address, I believe that protecting our environment and a strong economy go hand in hand. Now, our comprehensive energy plan recognizes more electric vehicles are essential to meeting our climate and energy goals, because we know 60% of our carbon emissions are related to transportation. So we need about 10%, about 50,000 of the cars and trucks on our roads to be electric by 2025, and 25% by 2030. Today, we only have about 1,000 EVs on the road, less than 1% of new car registration. So I don't believe we can meet these goals unless we help people make the transition. So there's hope on the horizon. I believe that, it's exciting to me to see electric vehicles being introduced, and we see more and more every single day. We saw that Harley Davidson put out a line of electric motorcycles, which I think is exciting in itself. You see Harley Davidson making that move, things are changing. In his final report, the Vermont Climate Action Commission recommends an incentive to make electric vehicles more affordable. So I believe this is the right approach, because as we've seen, incentives work. So I propose $1.5 million in rebates to help more people purchase EVs. And to lead by example, I've asked for $500,000 to invest in more EVs and EV infrastructure for our own state fleet. We should walk the talk. So I've also proposed a long-term revenue source to continue our record level of funding for clean water initiatives. These efforts built on the tremendous leadership to support a cleaner environment and mitigate the impacts of climate change of past governors and legislators. And this is a great area of balance, because working to protect our natural resources isn't just about making our state cleaner and healthier, it's also about growing the economy. And I know we can add to our quality of life by helping Vermonters gain a greater work-life balance. So as well, I joined with Governor Sununu to present a voluntary twin-state family leave plan. Now, our proposal, I always look for ways that we can agree on goals, and I agree family leave is important to our state, but our proposal would provide access to competitively priced plans for all employers and employees across the state, and in New Hampshire as well. Now, I know, and we're going to have this debate in the legislature, but I know some believe a government-funded program funded with a payroll tax is the way to go. But I'm asking them to at least give my plan a fair shot, because there are advantages of taking the step, at least the first step, that I'm proposing. First, we can launch it more quickly, more affordably, and more reliably than if the state had to create the program from scratch. Second, it ensures that we aren't placing the burden of startup costs or the risk of underfunding and insolvency on taxpayers. We've proven over and over many times how difficult it is for government to protect and replenish accounts such as this. And third, we're not mandating another cost on our employers and employees for an expense that some of them cannot afford. One of the concerns I've heard from some is that a voluntary approach might not have a big enough pool to make it sustainable. And that's why our proposal includes all eligible state employees from both states, creating a large and diverse pool of 18,000 overnight, in which we've already received 7 insurance companies who are interested in our proposal, which shows that it's viable. With a voluntary plan, we'll have a workable and scalable program that's administered efficiently, reduces risk to taxpayers and state government, and won't adversely affect our economy. And I think it's a positive step forward towards a goal that I believe we all share. I'll also continue our work to transform the good education we have now to the very best in the country. This could be the best economic tool that we could ask for. In my first term, working with the legislature, we increased investments in early care and learning, K-12, CTE, and higher education. And this year, I propose an additional $7 million for child care to make it more accessible and affordable for low-income and working families. I've also asked for another $4 million for higher education to help with loans, tuition costs, and associate degree programs. To help more people with training outside the traditional college track, my budget invests in non-degree educational programs and adult technical education. So we only have to, you don't have to look very far to see the challenges that we face in terms of our workforce. We have the average age of a construction worker in the state of Vermont today is about 56 years old. So think about that, and think about that in about 10 years when you're looking for a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, or an auto diagnostic technician. So I believe we can do all these things while working to make Vermont more affordable. First, we must make sure that our state spending isn't growing faster than our economy. Now, my budget this year, with the additional pressures and so forth, we're spending, my budget proposes spending more than we did last year, but I'm not proposing to raise significant taxes and fees. Over the last couple of years, we took some important steps. In my first year, my first term, we didn't raise a single tax or fee in the general fund. That means state government, for the first time in recent history, actually helped Vermonters keep more of what they earn, kept more in their pockets. And we also kept residential property tax rates level. So in total, with the hard work of our school boards, we avoided $71 million in projected property tax rate increases over the last 2 years. We also eliminated the income tax on Social Security for low and moderate income households and prevented a $30 million tax increase due to federal tax reforms. And to help keep businesses prospering, unemployment insurance and worker compensation costs have decreased, saving employers across the state tens of millions of dollars. In fact, workers' comp rates recently decreased for the third year in a row, meaning Vermont employers will pay about $40 million a year less than previous. This year, again, as I said, my budget is balanced and spends within our means while taking care of some of our debt. I think that's important. The unfunded liabilities that we face need to be paid off, and we need to step up and do that. We also are investing in areas that will give us the highest return. So my budget doesn't include any increases on broad-based taxes, like the income tax or the sales tax, or the rooms and meals tax. From my perspective, this is my perspective, adding taxes will continue to be the last resort. While I have proposed some revenue changes this year, they are small and specific to the areas that I believe need to be addressed. That includes a tax on e-cigarettes to help address a growing public health epidemic, which is also important to us as a society. So we can also make Vermont more affordable by getting more taxpayers here. In every corner of our state, I think you're seeing that here as well. There are businesses large and small ready to grow, but good jobs go unfilled because we don't have enough working age people to fill them. We've had some limited success over the last 2 years, but we need to do more to reach potential Vermonters and encourage them to move to our state. This year, my budget includes a total of $2.5 million to identify those most likely to consider moving to Vermont, tell them our story, and make it easier for them to get here. It starts with a data-driven marketing approach to identify and reach those interested in Vermont and what Vermont has to offer. It includes funding for relocation support to really sell Vermont by helping those who want to move here find a great job, housing in a community they're drawn to in the regions and job sectors that need them most. Last year, we saw incredible interest when we launched an initiative, and it was we heard some complaints on both sides on this one, but it was proposed by the Senate Economic Development Committee, a $10,000 incentive, remote worker incentive to move here. Now, I wasn't sure how this was going to work, but I thought, let's give it a shot. And what we saw was that it got us a lot of international media attention. We had nearly 3,000 people inquire about this program alone. Now, we have money enough for about 25 to 50 people, but we had 3,000 inquiries. So what this tells me is that incentives actually work. And some people are just looking for a reason to move here. So I propose building on the success of that program and relocating more new workers to jobs that are available right now. So the fact is, every new worker we recruit to come allows a business, a community, a school, the tax revenue it needs to grow. If we want to fund more early education or science and technology for kids, we need more taxpayers, not more taxes. Better roads and bridges, more taxpayers. More drug prevention and treatment, more taxpayers. Each new taxpayer provides a bit of relief for someone who's already here. It allows us to continue funding services and programs that Vermonters need and value. So this is my focus on this legislative session, and I think there's a lot of common ground with the legislature. I truly believe that we can have a more prosperous Vermont for all, but to do so, we all have to pull in the same direction. So with that, I thank you for listening to this part and open it up to questions at this point.
Governor, we have a line forming at the microphones already, so I know they want to have that too, so I'll just hand you the microphone and let you go.
Governor, thank you for your speech and for coming here. My name is Alec, I'm a student here. I'm wondering what you're doing to address climate change. We here at Middlebury passed a town resolution about 900 to 100 that had 3 main provisions. 1, a ban on new fossil fuel infrastructure. 2, recommitting to the 90% reduction of fossil fuel emissions by 2050. And 3, working to install new renewable energy capacity and energy conservation here. I believe this would bring money into Vermont, and it can make Vermont a clean energy hub. And also, as a young person, I'm very afraid of climate change. We know with the recent IPCC report that global warming is not linear, it's exponential, and we're starting to see that in Vermont already. I was in Montpelier last Friday for a climate strike where over 300 students showed up, and it was 61 degrees outside. So I'm wondering what you are going to do to help pass the 60 climate change related bills that are in either the House or the Senate, all of which have stalled. And I really hope that you work across the aisle like you did with guns to not only support but encourage some of these bills to pass. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I believe that we are pulling together on this issue. I believe climate change is real. I've stated that publicly. I was disappointed in the administration for pulling out of the Paris Climate Initiative. So we joined other states in doing so. So we're doing so independently. We formed the Climate Commission to listen to the initiatives, what we can do to move forward here, and we're taking them up on some of their initiatives. Not all, but we're working at them. As I mentioned before, some of the incentives towards to electric vehicles, I think, is important. 60% of our carbon emissions are due to transportation. So we're doing a pretty good job on the electrical front. We just need to do a better job on the transportation front. This is going to take, we're going to have to increase investments in our infrastructure, our charging infrastructure. We can't just automatically flip the switch overnight and have all vehicles switch to electric. We have to prepare for them, and we have to prepare for tax structures and so forth. We still have to maintain our roads and bridges and so forth, so we're going to have to contemplate that as we move forward as well. So I'm completely committed to the 90% renewable by 2050. I don't think anyone has backed away from that whatsoever. I think we're going to see a lot of technological changes that are going to have to exist for us to make those changes, but we're getting there. And as I said before, when you see companies like Harley-Davidson making the switch, when you see Tesla coming out with different types of vehicles, when you see Ford coming out with an F-150 that's going to be electric in the coming year, things are changing, and for the better. And I believe that regardless of, I believe that climate change is real. We just have to look at the past winter to see that. I mean, we thought in November, when we had that big snowstorm, I thought we were going to have snow for the rest of the year because of that. Well, then in December, after November, December came, and we lost all our snow. It rained, and the temperatures raised and so forth. Went back through the same thing in January, and then we lost the snow again. So we've seen these vast increases in ranges of temperature throughout Vermont. So climate change is upon us, it's here, we're dealing with it, and I believe that we have a lot of goals that are the same with the legislature, but the legislature isn't all together on this either. So we, again, look forward to working with them to try to put forward initiatives that will get us to 90% renewables by 2050.
Thanks, Governor. Senator Mike.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
My name is Andrew Pizzula. I'm Secretary of the Addison County Democratic Committee, even though I try not to brag about it. But the thing I have to brag about here in Addison County, we're number one. We turned out 64% of registered voters in an off-year election. All right, none of the other 13 counties got close. Chittenden, the slackers, they turned out 58%. And below the poorer counties, 52%. So, of course, I wasn't really bragging down at town hall. I said next time 70% and town clerk Ann Webster bumped it up to 80%. You've got to turn out 80% of the vote. And I'm sure some of them will vote Republican and independent, but we could use your help. How about making election day a holiday, a paid holiday? I know businesses will cry like babies, but it is the most important patriotic duty we have. So could you support us in democracy? In Addison County and throughout the state, declare Election Day a holiday and promote that to your friends at the national level.
Yeah, you know, I'm in favor of doing everything we can. I think it's been, we've seen over the years a decline in some respects to people participating. We saw an uptick this year, which is great to see. And we need to continue that because it is a civic duty that we have. But I look at the poor, not to look back very far, just about 2 weeks ago, the poor performance. I don't know how Addison County did, to be honest with you, but I know how the whole state did. The whole state turned out for town meeting day. The whole state was at 18%. And we should be embarrassed about that, and that's not good enough. Now, we have a state holiday for state employees on town meeting day. And I would venture to say not all of them participated. I don't know what the answer is. I'm open to anything that will encourage more people. But what I've seen is when people are angry, they show up to vote. When they're happy, sometimes not. So I don't know what this means for town meeting day. I know there was a lot of unhappy people last November. And they showed up to vote. So, again, I'm open-minded, look forward to hearing different ideas, but let's make sure they work, because a lot of people just consider another paid holiday as another day for a vacation, and they don't turn out to vote. So, again, we need to do better. I'm with you, but let's figure out ways to make that happen.
Thank you, Governor.
Good morning, Governor Scott. My name is Claire Funke, and I'm a student at Mount Abraham Union High School, and I'm also a member of our Environmental Action Group. Okay. Hi, my name is Cora, and I'm a student at Mount Abe, and I'm also a member of our Environmental Action Group. And currently we're working on creating a ban prohibiting single-use plastic bags, expanded polystyrene containers, and also plastic straws in Bristol. And these are modeled after the proposed bills H74 and S113. And that one actually got voted on last week. So we've already collected close to 100 signatures in just a few days in support of what we're doing. And so are you in support of Bill S113? And what actions have you taken or do you plan to take to combat the urgent problems of climate change and plastic pollution in our state? Because I think this issue is extremely important to most young people, and swift action will ensure that our future, specifically a potential future in Vermont, which is something you're really concerned with, will be secure.
Yeah, I mean, that's not it. Just the only thing is not just plastic bags and straws. I mean, we need to do a better job of encouraging recycling and packaging and so forth, so that we have more reusable. I'm a conservative Vermonter, very frugal by nature. I try not to waste anything more. I try to get the life cycle, the most out of every product that I possibly can buy. And I think that's part of the answer as well. We'll see how this, the plastic bags and straws goes through the legislature. Chris, has it passed the Senate?
It's on the floor this week.
Okay. We'll see how it goes through. I'm not opposed to that. We in my family, we use reusable bags when we go shopping. We try and do everything we can not to waste. So I think that's part of Vermont, to waste a whole lot. The other thing that we don't like to be done, we don't like to be told what to do either. That's the other part of the equation. So anything we can do to incentivize, though, I think is a better method. But I'm not particularly opposed to this. We'll see how it goes to the legislature.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Wilson. I'm from Shoreham. Last Friday evening, I watched Vermont This Week's special, where you were interviewed for an hour. And during the interview, in response to a question from Ellen Quittner asking why you aren't pushing for universal primary care, you responded, and I quote, "We are doing pretty good job in Vermont. 97% of Vermonters are covered by some sort of health care at this point in time. And then you proceeded to say, we are moving forward with the all-payer model, which is just to say a different payment model. According to the 2018 Vermont Health Insurance Survey put out by the Vermont Department of Health, the number of Vermonters who are underinsured has gone up yet again. Quoting from the report, 36% of Vermonters under the age of 65 are underinsured. Their medical expenses are more than their income can bear, and they delay care at a higher rate than those with adequate insurance. And this is exactly what I heard. I ran for state rep in our district, the Addison Rutland 1 district, and I knocked on hundreds of doors. The number one concern that most people I spoke to had was the high cost of health care. And this wasn't just low income, this was middle class folks. When I knocked on the door, they basically told me because of the high premiums, the deductibles and co-pays, they were unable to afford to use their insurance even though they have it. And then on the other hand, there were others who were faced with making a decision, do I take the money that I would be paying for my premium and save that money and use it for my health care for my family? And so the all-payer model does not address this critical health care issue.
You have a question.
Yes, I do. How do you plan to address our health care access crisis?
Yeah, I would disagree. I would say that the all-payer model is showing some success. It revolves around a different payment model, also about prevention. A high percentage of the effort is on prevention. I believe that that's part of the answer for the future. Here's our issue. We have 626,000 people in the state of Vermont, and as I said before, we're seeing more deaths than births. We're aging. We have a younger population that we need desperately here in this state. That in itself will help in many respects by bringing in more youth to our state. You know, we have to face the facts. An aging population utilizes healthcare more than the younger, healthier population. We don't have as many people here in this state. The age group 25 to 45, we've seen it reduced since the last census of about 30,000 people out of that category alone. And that's why I say that we need to focus on that as much. I don't know that forcing everyone into healthcare, like I said, we have 90% now, 97% now. I'm not sure that forcing people into buying insurance that they can't afford is the answer. So we have to look for a different model in terms of how we deliver it, as well as the prevention model that I speak about. So I don't know if we disagree, but I'm just not sure how to force people in there to pay for something they can't afford is the answer. And who's going to pay for it? We had the debate on single payer for about 5 or 6 years and determined that we couldn't afford it. What are we going to do? I guess I'm back to you.
Yeah, can I answer?
Sure. What's the answer?
Okay,
sure.
Do I need to start the clock over? Okay, so one of the things that Vermont has put together is universal primary care. And studies have shown that we could actually cover every single Vermonter for a per capita cost of
I went through that exercise. It didn't work.
Yes, it did.
No, it didn't.
Have you looked at the 2015
That's the single
study?
payer model you're talking about.
No, this is you only focusing on universal primary care.
So maybe you can tell us what the difference is.
Universal primary care is providing primary care access to every single Vermonter, getting the insurance companies out of that particular service and allowing doctors to practice primary care, and so that unlimited care, if mental health, substance abuse, outpatient, and the cost and the price tag is very low, it would then go to increase health, and it would be accessible to everyone.
That sounds like single payer. That sounds exactly like single payer.
But it's a slice, it's the most inexpensive slice that has the biggest benefit.
If it worked, then I think it would have been implemented at that point.
But no, we were trying to implement just that. We were trying to do what Canada did by implementing one piece part, and not the whole thing.
Well, again, as I said, during the whole debate on single payer,
And
show me how much it costs, how much it's going to, who's going to
And
pay
as
for it.
somebody that actually is a poster child for relocating to Vermont telecommuting, if you want to attract people, and I pay a whole hell of a lot of taxes here, and property taxes. And my company, when I retired 6 months later, they dropped my health care. Since 2013, my health care and co-pays have gone up 47%. And that's not sustainable, and we're healthy. And thank God, we're healthy. And so, there's an elephant in the room, and we're not looking at it.
Yeah, well, we have, like I said, we've been focused on this all-payer model for the last 3 or 4 years and trying to encourage the growth in that sector. And, that's what we've decided to focus on. Again, prove it to us, to the legislature, how is it that we're going to be able to afford it, and who's going to be able to?
Thank you. Thank you. In the interest of time, we'll moving and get a question in a second.
I have a question, but I'd like to defer my time to Ellen Oxfeld because she has much more information even on the primary care thing, and I think it's very important that we hear that. She's worked like crazy on this. So I defer my time to Ellen, if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm Ellen Oxford. I have a follow-up question on universal primary care. I know you're a good conservative and you've always asked about how we can afford health care. And I do want to point out that we now spend $6 billion a year in the state of Vermont on health care. Every single dollar comes from us, but about 30% of it is wasted because of our very complex private insurance system uses $1 out of $3 for administration. That's why the legislature decided in 2011 to pass Act 48. They committed and decided that public financing is a cheaper way, a more efficient way to cover all Vermonters. But it was too big to do it all at once. So universal primary care proposes publicly financing only primary care. It's only 5% of total health care costs. Then all Vermonters would have access to primary care. They would not delay going to the doctor. Right now, people delay because of high out-of-pocket costs. People die every year, every doctor can tell you, because someone has symptoms of pneumonia, or they come into the office with stage 4 cancer because they never went to the doctor, even though they had insurance, due to high out-of-pockets. Universal primary care is a bill in the House. H129 has not been taken off the wall of House Health yet. It's about $200 million to fund, but keep in mind that's out of the $6 billion that we spend. Each year, we all spend this money, and whatever is charged for public financing would not be charged through our premiums. So it's a win-win situation, and I want to ask you as a good conservative, how you can support a system that's so wasteful. And I do want to say, the all-payer model is about how we reimburse doctors. But if a patient or a potential patient has a high out-of-pocket cost and does not go to the doctor because their out-of-pocket cost is high, the all-payer model is useless. They're going to avoid going to the doctor. My time is up. So as a good conservative, why not support moving toward a more efficient, publicly financed healthcare system that will save money and save lives?
Yeah, well, obviously, I didn't create the healthcare system that we have today, and maybe we do it a lot differently if we could have a do-over.
You can.
Look forward to the discussion through the legislature on this very bill. Obviously, as you mentioned, there was a high turnout last November. That lost more of our conservative Republicans in the legislature. We're down to about 43, I think, in the House right now, 7 in the Senate. So you kind of somewhat have the horsepower now. So I look forward to the debate in the legislature to see how that all comes out. But still, I still want to see, who's going to pay for it, how much it's going to cost, and how do we actually pay for it.
And just to point out, we do all pay for it now. What we're talking about is how we pay. And is there a fairer and more efficient way? And one thing I think we've determined is private insurance is pretty inefficient and not very fair.
From your own testimony, you said that there's a lot of waste in terms of administrative costs, so I would assume that would, if there's, how many percent did you say?
Well, in the private insurance system, it's 30% of every dollar
So
spent.
about $2 billion we save by going to the system.
When you do something like Medicare, it's like 3% administrative waste, so public financing is a lot easier. But what we're talking about is doing this incrementally by making primary care publicly financed publicly first. Because what we found out with Act 48 was it's a 2-year legislative session, and it's a big fight to transform the whole thing at once. But this is a great investment. Let me just say why. People will go to the doctor if it's a public good for primary care, and we will save a lot more. You know, remember, $6 million, that's the figure we're talking about. If people go to the doctor more and get caught early, we're going to save those ER charges and high charges when people get much sicker. So it's H129. I'm not just focusing on you, I'm also focusing on the legislators as well, though many, and I thank our Addison County delegation, many of you have co-sponsored this bill, but I hope you can learn about it and be open-minded as a conservative, because I think publicly financed healthcare is something that a lot of business people are now supporting precisely because it's efficient. And then it also saves lives. It's humane and economically efficient.
So I think we agree on the prevention piece. I think that more we can prevent from happening, the less cost we'll see in the future. So that's why I'm in favor of moving forward with our all-payer model, improving that as well.
But that's how we pay physicians. It doesn't cover people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to.
All right. Hi, my name is Greta Hardy-Mattel.
This microphone if you could. Perfect. You're all right.
Cool. My name is Greta Hardy-Mattel, and I'm from East Middlebury. And I'd like to shift back to talking about climate change. I appreciate you talking about that in your opening remarks, and also about electric vehicles, and I appreciate that you support that. But I'd like to talk specifically about weatherization, which we spoke about before you got here. Because currently thermal energy, or the energy used to heat buildings, takes up 42% of Vermont's energy use, and only 19% of it is renewable. And much of the energy used to heat buildings is wasted because of poor weatherization. And the House bills H369 and H439, as well as the Senate bill that Chris Bray is introducing, would leverage a 4-cent tax on heating fuels in order to, at least that's how it is with the House bill. I don't know about the Senate bill as well.
Can you speak into the microphone better, please?
Yeah, sorry. And so this 4-cent tax would help fund the home weatherization program, which helps lower income residents save fuel and money by improving the efficiency of their homes. And needless to say, it also decreases the amount of total thermal energy that Vermont uses. Governor, you promised no new taxes and fees, yet you also promised, and you promised to us today, to reduce costs for families, especially low-income families, increase energy efficiency, and lower emissions in order to get to the 90% renewable energy by 2050 goal. And I believe that these bills would clearly accomplish these goals, and so I'm wondering, will you sign them?
Yeah, well, they have a long ways to go, obviously. I'm in favor of weatherization, have been my entire adult life. I think it's part of the answer. It's much like healthcare. It's part of prevention, not wasting as much. As a conservative, as a frugal Vermonter, I think we should be saving more money. I don't believe that we have to raise a tax in order to do so. I think we have to prioritize in order to put more resources into areas that we think are important. In my budget, 2 years ago, we made an incredible investment in housing, about $37 million housing bond, leveraged another $65 million for about $100 million worth of new housing, the largest investment in housing Vermont has ever seen. This year, I propose that we look at our dilapidated housing stock. That I believe that we need to renovate, and in many of our communities, I grew up in Barry, and we have a lot of dilapidated stock there. But I think it's going to take, from my perspective, a change in tax structure in order to do that, to allow for entrepreneurs, maybe some contractors and individuals who want to buy some of this housing stock to be able to retrofit, upgrade, weatherize, and then be able to put it back on the market without the incredible tax disadvantage to doing so within a short period of time. So that's what we put forward. Again, I look forward to anything we can do. We put money into weatherization over the years. I have this Wheels for Warmth program that I do every single year. We've raised about $500 million for fuel assistance and weatherization over the last 10 years. So I'm committed to this. I think it's important, but I don't think we need to raise another tax to do so. I think that we can do so with the resources we have if we want to dedicate that area.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Margaret Corker. Governor Hammond, well, first of all, I want to add one thing to the conversation these ladies had, is to explain that the healthcare program that they're offering is very, very different from the one that failed. They have to be separated so people can understand. But anyway, my topic. I'd like to know how you feel about this legislative session, how it is going this year, and if it seems to you that you might have to call back the legislature again this year after the end of the regular session like happened last year. I think taxpayers were concerned and somewhat surprised about having to see these folks have to return after working so hard. Thank you. Working so hard like they always do in the legislature. To have to come back at the end of the session, especially for the budget. I know the budget's obviously very important. It's my understanding that your staff members don't really participate with the committees during the regular session, as we have come to expect with other administrations. It seems that this, at least, is part of the problem. Does that important? The problem is that important issues don't come up for serious consideration and work until the time is running out on the session. I'd like to be assured that last year's timing is not going to be repeated this year, that they have to go into May, because that costs us a lot of money as taxpayers.
Well, a couple things. First of all, I would argue that it takes two sides to have a disagreement. So I was pretty clear in my first 2 years. I didn't believe that we needed to raise any tax and fees. We're spending more than we're taking in. The knee-jerk reaction of just increasing revenue and raising taxes is something that I didn't think we needed to do in the first 2 years. I put a line in the sand, admittedly. And I said that we didn't need to do this. We're spending more money than we did the previous year in revenue. My budget included that. And then we didn't need to raise taxes anymore, or fees. So they decided to push that a bit and decided to resist that in some respect. So we had our disagreements. We did a lot of good work over the last few years. We had a lot of drama, and I think that received a lot of attention. But I would say that we did some good things too. Now, this year, I've said I didn't make that commitment during the campaign. I was very careful and clear. I said that it would be a high bar to raise fees. It would be a high bar to raise taxes, but I wasn't ruling that out. So I've not made that same commitment. I would say this year on both sides that they've been more receptive. They've listened to some of what we have to offer. We've been included in the committee discussions, so we've been doing very well. I believe this year, something that we should all be proud of. We'll see how the session works out. I don't have any surprises. I didn't have any surprises last year. I just recommitted to saying we weren't going to raise taxes and fees. I think that was pretty simple. And in the end, there was taxes and fees that were involved with the budget, so I decided to veto it. But again, this year, it's a new slate, a clean slate. We're working together, and I would say that things are going pretty well. Now, nothing has passed, either the Senate or House at this point has not come to my desk. I haven't seen anything yet that has been taken up for final action, so I haven't had an opportunity to either sign or veto any bills at this point. But the other point I would make is May is the typical time when there's adjournment. When you get into June, that's when you're really into overtime. In my 20 years in the Senate, I can remember at least a couple of times where we've been into June. So it's not common, but May is common. That's when typically the legislature doesn't adjourn until in May at some point.
We have time for one more question, Governor?
Yes.
Thank you, Governor. We are in the middle of a serious public health crisis. Last year, 110 Vermonters died of opiate overdoses. Statewide, excluding Chittenden County, overdose deaths were up 27%. In Chittenden County, however, opioid overdose deaths were down by over half. That begs the question, what is Chittenden County doing right that the rest of the state is doing wrong? And as I've studied this issue, I'm a drug policy fanatic. You're a generalist, you know a lot of things about a lot of things. I just really focus on drug policy. As I look at what Chittenden County is doing right, I see courageous leadership from folks like their county prosecutor, Sarah George, from Police Chief of Burlington, Brandon Del Pozo, taking bold policy choices like decriminalizing buprenorphine, and these things save lives. We're talking about 110 of our sisters, our parents, veterans coming back with wounds, both psychological and physical, falling prey to addiction, to pain pills first, to depression, to all the things that drive the underlying causes of drug use. But when we look to expand the successes of Chittenden County to the rest of the state by decriminalizing buprenorphine possession statewide, what we get is your Department of Public Safety Chief, Tom Anderson, lobbying the federal prosecutor, Christina Nolan, to come out against it, to say that it is dangerous and illegal and going to drive more opiate overdose deaths, even though we know the opposite is true. And I ask you, Governor, will you please focus your drug policy on the science instead of the stigma?
Well, thank you for the question, and I want to applaud everything that Chittenden County is doing. We work jointly with them. This isn't a one county effort. This is a statewide effort. We work together. And this is not discriminatory in any respect. This affects every single one of us. So we take this seriously. I appointed Jolinda LeClaire as my director of opioid prevention. We have a commission that we have that works throughout the state. We haven't solved this problem, but we have increased the number of treatment centers throughout Vermont. In terms of some of the efforts that we made in terms of opening up some of these treatment centers, for instance, in St. Albans, alleviated some of the waiting list in Chittenden County. So some of our efforts actually helped in Chittenden County as well. In terms of I think you were alluding to the safe injection sites. They have
No. Buprenorphine decriminalization. It's H162. It's to make it so that somebody who has unprescribed buprenorphine, which is a medication-assisted treatment drug, to make that no longer be something they get arrested for, instead to make it something they get referred to, say, the Howard Center for.
We are looking to work together in any respects to try and solve this issue. This opioid epidemic is something that's plaguing our country, plaguing our state. And if we can learn from Chittenden County, we're all ears. And the legislature will go through this. We'll take a look at this, I'm sure, if it's in bill form at this point. And so we'll have the discussion. I'm looking for any ways that we can do to reduce the effects of this, because it has an incredible effect, as you know, as you said, incredible effect, detrimental effect on our economy, on our people, on our families, and it's something that we're focused on. So it's not as though we're turning a blind eye to this.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, Governor, and I appreciate that, because H-162 is on the floor on Wednesday of the House, and this is the one that I'm talking about, to decriminalize buprenorphine possession. And as I said, Tom Anderson is taking a very, very public and strong and loud opposition to this, and I would beg you to have a conversation with your policy chiefs about taking an open approach, an open mind to this, and not taking just a 1990s era drug war approach to this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment.
Governor,
We're over time, but...
Yeah, but I'm not going to blow you.
Okay.
Governor Bush, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I'm going to be just one easy, no existential threat to the globe. S-22, you said when people are angry, they're going to come and vote. And there was a sea of orange at Vermont Tech last Tuesday. So Senator Phil Baruch's bill and parties was watered down after Tuesday. Are you going to still support it if it gets changed like Senator Dick Sears' bill was last year, S-55? If it gets changed, you don't have veto power anymore, I'm sorry. What are you going to do to stop it?
Well, again, we'll see how it goes through the process. I'm not, while I have a tremendous amount of empathy for those families, I've had friends and family members who have taken their own life, and I have an incredible amount of empathy for them. I'm not sure that this bill, and for those who don't know, this was something that was passed out of the Senate, a 3-2 vote that would require a 24-hour waiting period for handguns only. And I'm not sure that this, from my perspective, actually fixes the problem. We have a lot of mental health issues in the state. We're focusing on that. We need to get to the root of the problem. And I'm not sure that this actually does it. We'll see how it works its way through. It's got to go through it just came out of committee. It'll go to the floor of the Senate next. Then if it's successful in the Senate, we'll go to the House for deliberations there. So we've got a long ways to go. I'm not sure it's, whether it's on a fast track, whether it'll be taken up in the House this year or not, I'm just not sure. But I'll continue. I'll weigh in as it proceeds through the House and the Senate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor. Program every Monday throughout the legislative session is brought to you by the Bridgeport Grange and the Addison County Farm Bureau. Just to let you know that next week is our agricultural luncheon. It's at noontime in Bridgeport. Noon in Bridgeport at the Grange Hall. So please don't come for breakfast tomorrow. Next week, come for lunch. Their agricultural issues will be emphasized, and we hope all legislators attend as they usually try to do. On your way out, let me remind you there's a donation bucket. Anything that you can help us with will help defray the costs of these breakfasts throughout the legislative session. Addison County Farm Bureau is having a dinner dance for anybody who has any connection to agriculture. And that's coming up on Saturday, April 6th. You'll see these posters around